The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed in Mason's ears as he leaned against the service desk of the 24-hour supermart on the outskirts of Dulwich. The clock on the wall blinked 11:59 p.m. His first graveyard shift. Minimum wage. Lonely aisles. Fluorescent ghosts. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under amber lights, empty except for a rusting pickup truck and a row of grocery carts that trembled slightly in the wind. Mason stared out through the sliding doors. He wasn't afraid of the dark. But he was afraid of what the dark could remember. The store manager, Carver, handed him a laminated schedule. Stock the shelves. Watch the monitors. Clean up spills. Don't fall asleep. If you hear humming from aisle 12, ignore it. Mason blinked. What? Carver didn't smile. Ignore it. Then he left. The clock struck midnight. It was around 2 a.m. when Mason heard it. A low, steady hum. He was restocking cereal boxes in aisle 3 when it started. The sound was faint at first, like the far-off whisper of static. But it grew louder, pulling at his attention. He dropped a box of Cheerios and stood up. It came from aisle 12. He walked slowly, each footstep echoing too loud in the stillness. The store's layout was a perfect grid, symmetrical and wide. Aisle 12, tucked near the back, hadn't been visited since he started. It looked like any other aisle. Cleaning supplies. Mops. Bleach. Buckets. But the lights flickered overhead. One bulb blinked in a rhythmic stutter, like Morse code. And the air was cold. Far colder than the rest of the store. He took one step into the aisle. The humming stopped. Every product on the shelves was turned backward, labels facing the wall. He didn't scream. But he walked quickly back to the service desk, heart hammering. On the monitor, aisle 12 showed nothing. Just empty space. Her name tag said, Maria. She arrived just after 3 a.m., wheeling a bucket and mop. Short, weathered, with deep lines around her eyes, she didn't speak much. New? She asked, voice low. Mason nodded. She wrung out the mop. Don't go into the basement. He frowned. We have a basement. She nodded once. Behind the stockroom. Locked. For a reason. Mason tried to laugh it off. This place is full of warnings, huh? Maria didn't laugh. Later that night, as he returned from cleaning the dairy aisle, he saw Maria at aisle 12. She stood frozen, staring into the flickering overhead light. Her mop lay abandoned on the floor. Maria, he called. She turned slowly. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then she walked away. The next night, she didn't show up. Carver said she quit by the 5th shift. Mason stopped trying to pretend everything was fine. The cameras glitched randomly, always around aisle 12. Boxes rearranged themselves overnight. The humming came and went. Then he found the tape. It was unlabeled. Hidden behind the breaker box. Old VHS. He still didn't know why he brought an old VCR from home. Maybe he expected it. Maybe part of him already knew. He played it in the back office. The footage was grainy, time-stamped from a decade ago. It showed a young boy, blonde, nervous, wearing a supermart uniform. Mason didn't recognize him. He walked into aisle 12. Stood still. Looked up. The lights flickered. Then he screamed. The screen went black. When the video resumed, he was gone. The aisle was empty. The tape ended. Mason rewound it. Paused. At the moment the lights flickered, in one frame, a face. Behind the boy. White. Expressionless. Eyes like hollow glass. That eye in the break room, hidden behind an old vending machine, Mason found a spiral-bound journal. Entries were dated between 2008 and 2010. March 15, 2009, heard the humming again. Carver says ignore it, but I saw a girl in white on the monitors. June 2, 2009. Maria said the humming is a warning. Don't look her in the eye. September 7, 2009, I opened the basement door. Something followed me back up. The last entry. November 13, 2009, I'm not me anymore. She's in my dreams. She hums. Carver knows. He always knew. There were ink smudges on the final page. And faintly, beneath the scribbles, in different handwriting. Help me. Mason started losing time. An hour would pass and he'd have no memory of what he'd done. Shelves would be stocked without him touching them. He'd wake up standing in front of aisle 12, the air sharp with cold. Then one night, he found something carved into his arm. Not fresh, scarred. Old. Faded. For words, you locked the door. His nightmares worsened. He saw a hallway underwater. Children pounding on glass. A girl in white, floating, her hair haloed around her like ink in water. She whispered something he couldn't understand. Until one night, he did. Why did you leave us? Rain. That's what Mason remembered first. Not the kind that patters gently against a window, but the violent, pounding kind that turns streets into rivers and buildings into tombs. He was 17. His clothes were soaked, and his heart pounded with panic as he sprinted through the trees behind Dalridge Orphanage, a flashlight bouncing wildly in his shaking hand. They had said it would be a heavy storm. But no one had predicted the dam would break. No one had prepared for the flood. He had volunteered to help with crowd control, ushering kids to the gymnasium. That was the safest place, they'd said. Elevated. Reinforced. But the water rose faster than anyone expected. By the time the staff realized the basement was taking on water, it was too late. The power cut out. Screams echoed down the hallways. Then came the order, lock the lower levels. Seal off the basement. Keep the others from panicking. He hadn't wanted to do it. He remembered that now. He screamed at the headmistress. Pleaded. Cried. But she handed him a ring of keys and said coldly, lock it. Or we all die. And so he had. He ran door to door, turning keys with trembling hands, sealing off each hallway as the water crept higher. Then he reached the final door, the one that led to the rec room, where a handful of children had been playing hours earlier. He hesitated. He heard them pounding on the glass, small fists thudding. He saw her. A girl in a white dress. The same face. The same eyes. Mason, she screamed, though he didn't know how she knew his name. He could have opened it. But he didn't. He turned the key and locked it. And then he ran. The supermart no longer felt like a store. It felt like a mausoleum. Mason could no longer distinguish between memory and haunting. Each shift bled into the next. The walls whispered. The cameras showed figures that vanished on approach. Aisle 12 wept condensation like cold breath. He stood there now, facing it. The humming returned. He walked forward, slow but determined. This time, he wouldn't turn back. The lights dimmed as he stepped into the aisle. He touched the shelves. Frostbitten. Silent. Then, her. She stood at the end, wearing white. Wet hair clinging to her face. Eyes wide with betrayal. Why? She whispered. I was scared, Mason said, voice cracking. I was told to. You left us. The shelves began to rattle. Lights exploded above. The ground trembled beneath him. I didn't know you. You locked the door. She stepped closer. Around her, the air pulsed with water, impossible underwater echoes, like distant screaming. Mason fell to his knees. "I'm sorry." Everything stopped. Silence. She knelt in front of him, touched his face, and smiled. "Then help us leave." He didn't remember walking through the employee door that led to the basement. Only that he was suddenly there. The lock had rusted open, as if time itself had decided the moment had come. The stairs beneath were steep, lined with black mildew and years of dust. His flashlight flickered as he descended, the air growing damp and still. At the base, water pooled ankle-high. The walls bore scratch marks. And there, in the dark, dozens of eyes. Children. Pale, soaked, translucent. Watching. She stood among them. The girl in white. "You remembered," she said. "I had to. They can't leave until you let them." Mason looked around at the spirits. Some clutched stuffed animals. Others stared at the floor. All carried the weight of drowning. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Then I'll stay." The girl tilted her head. "That's not what we want." She held out a key. "The door, Mason. Unlock it." He turned the key. Not a physical one, there was no lock in front of him, but the one inside. The door in his mind. The one memory had tried to bury beneath years of denial. A blinding light filled the basement. The water shimmered, then receded. The children began to fade, their forms rising like mist, no longer tethered. The girl in white looked at Mason, her eyes soft now. "You remembered. That's all we needed." He nodded, tears running freely down his face. "I'm sorry," he said. She smiled. Then she was gone. He woke at the service desk. Sunlight filtered through the windows. The parking lot sparkled with morning dew. Carver walked in, whistling, and gave Mason a puzzled look. "You stayed the whole shift?" he asked. Mason blinked. "Yes," he said. Something was different. The air felt lighter. The lights, brighter. Aisle 12. Silent. And in the break room, where the vending machine once stood, there was only a blank wall. He never saw the girl again. But sometimes, when the rain came heavy, he'd feel a cool breath on his cheek and hear a distant hum. And he'd whisper, "I didn't forget." The dead never haunted him again. Because he had finally remembered. And that was all they'd ever wanted. Stillwater, Montana, population just under 700, was the sort of town people forgot even existed. Located off a rural highway and surrounded by dense pine forest and long-forgotten railway tracks, it was quiet, remote, and cloaked in stars each night. Elliot Harper, 29, had returned to Stillwater after years away. A journalist turned freelancer, he came back to take care of his late uncle's house, which sat empty at the edge of the woods. The idea was to spend a couple months cleaning the place up and maybe, just maybe, get his head straight after the burnout and sleeplessness of city life. That first night back, Elliot stood on the porch, sipping tea. His phone had no signal, but he didn't mind. The sky was clear, more stars than he'd seen in years. He let the cool silence sink in. Then something odd caught his eye. It started as a flicker on the horizon, white at first, like a distant plane. But then it changed course sharply, banking left and rising in a steep angle, faster than anything he knew could fly. It hovered for a moment, a pinprick of light in the sky. Then it blinked out. Elliot narrowed his eyes. Probably a drone. Or maybe military aircraft. There was a base about 40 miles out. He made a mental note to ask someone in town about it. But a strange feeling lingered, crawling just beneath his skin. A prickling unease. He stepped back inside, locked the door, and told himself to forget it. That night, he couldn't sleep. The next morning was bright and quiet. Birds chirped as Elliot wandered the overgrown yard with a cup of coffee. He noted a few broken fence posts, the way the pine needles had piled high in corners of the porch, and a rusted wind chime that hadn't made a sound in years. Stillwater looked just like he remembered, peaceful, a little forgotten, but safe. The strange light from the night before almost seemed silly in the daylight. Almost. After breakfast, Elliot drove into town to stock up on groceries and supplies. The general store hadn't changed in the 10 years since he'd left. A bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. "Elliot Harper," a voice called out. It was Nancy Baird, who'd run the place since he was a kid. "Hey, Nancy. Long time." "Sure is. Back for good?" "Just taking care of Uncle Henry's place." "I was sorry to hear about him." He kept to himself, but he was kind. They chatted briefly before he gathered what he needed. On the way out, he mentioned the light he'd seen. "Oh. Out by the old McCready Fields?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Close to that, yeah. Weird flight pattern. Real fast." Nancy hesitated. "People see things out there sometimes. Lights, strange sounds. Always around the same patch of woods. Cattle went missing a few years back. No one ever found out what happened." Elliot tried to laugh it off. "You think it's aliens or something?" She smiled thinly. "I think there's more in those woods than trees. Just, be careful out there." That night, Elliot lay in bed, listening. Around 2 a.m., something stirred. It was faint at first. A high, oscillating hiss, like wind through a narrow vent. But there was no wind. Then he heard the trees moving, no, not just rustling. Bending. Snapping. And something low, like a mechanical hum buried beneath the sound of the forest. He sat up, heart pounding. Something was out there. The next morning, Elliot searched for signs in the woods. He found nothing. No broken branches, no scorched earth. But the sound still echoed in his mind. The day passed uneventfully. He fixed a loose shutter, sorted through old junk in the garage, and distracted himself with mindless chores. But dusk came fast in Stillwater, and with it, unease. He set up an old audio recorder by the window. It was meant for interviews, but it would have to do. He left it running and tried to sleep. At 3:12 a.m., he woke with a start. Light, soft, pulsing, filtered through the blinds. His heart thumped. He got up slowly, peeled back the curtain. In the woods beyond the field, several orbs floated. Not flashlights. They moved too smoothly, too independently. One rose above the tree line. Another zipped horizontally with impossible speed, then stopped, hovering silently. Elliot grabbed his phone. Still no signal. He tried recording the lights through the glass, but the footage was black. Then came the sound, like a tone buried deep in his skull. Not loud, but undeniable. His vision swam for a moment. He dropped the phone. Outside, the lights blinked out. The room was pitch black again. Elliot stood frozen, breathing hard. He backed away from the window. That was no plane. No drone. And definitely no trick of the eyes. He didn't sleep. When he checked the recorder the next morning, it had stopped at 3:12 a.m., the exact moment he woke up. Elliot stared at the recorder. No error message. No dead battery. It had just stopped, cleanly, precisely. He drove into town again, asking if anyone else had seen strange lights the night before. No one had. Nancy gave him a curious look. "You sure you're getting enough sleep, hon? Sometimes the woods can play tricks on you." But he knew what he saw. What he felt. Back home, he sat at the edge of the woods as evening fell. He left the recorder on the porch this time and brought a flashlight, notebook, and thermos of coffee. At exactly 3 a.m., a noise came. Not a hiss this time, but a faint rhythmic click. Like two stones tapped together in a slow, methodical beat. Then came the lights. One orb, glowing blue-white, emerged from between the trees. It floated silently toward him, stopping just at the tree line. Elliot remained still. The orb hovered there, pulsing. Then, slowly, it began to retreat, back into the woods. Something compelled him to follow. He stepped off the porch, careful not to make a sound. The forest air was damp, charged. The deeper he walked, the dimmer the orb became. Finally, it disappeared. But the sound remained. A low, electrical thrum pulsed beneath his feet. He turned to go back. That's when the light reappeared, but this time, behind him. The following day, Elliot took the recorder into town, hoping someone might know why it had shut off. He stopped by the library, where he found Thomas Griggs, Stillwater's unofficial historian and a man with an unsettling memory for the town's strange occurrences. When Elliot mentioned the malfunction, Thomas frowned. "You said it stopped at 3:12 a.m. That's when the logs say the last incident happened, back in '98. Same woods, same time." Elliot blinked. "What incident?" Thomas leaned back in his chair, cracking his knuckles. "A girl named Rachel Madsen. She was camping with two friends out by the McCready Fields. They all heard the humming, saw the lights. Rachel walked toward them and never came back. Her friends were found 2 days later, wandering near the old tracks. They didn't remember a thing past 3:12 a.m. You're telling me someone vanished, and no one did anything?" "Oh, there were searches. Helicopters, dogs, the whole thing. But it was like she'd evaporated. Nothing left but her shoes." Elliot left shaken, the weight of that detail, her shoes, clinging to him like static. That night, he locked every window, pushed furniture against the door, and kept a knife by his bed. Sleep came late and uneasy. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the lights returned. This time, they were closer. Elliot stayed low, crawling to the window. He watched, breath shallow, as a figure stepped from the tree line. Thin, long-limbed, and backlit by one of the orbs. It didn't walk, it drifted. Slowly. Deliberately. The tone began again, deeper this time, like it came from the marrow of the earth. Elliot couldn't move. His body locked. The figure turned its head, if that's what it was, toward the house. And then, the lights vanished. Just like that. The figure, too. Elliot collapsed to the floor, sweating, shaking. In the silence that followed, something scratched faintly at the back door. Elliot's senses dulled as the blinding white light washed over him. His mind swam in a haze, time seemed to stretch and contract, like being caught in a slow-moving tide. His heart pounded but his body felt weightless, as if gravity had slipped away. For a long moment, he was neither standing nor falling, just suspended in that luminous void. Then, suddenly, the light faded. He blinked and found himself no longer at the edge of the forest, but inside a vast chamber, though chamber hardly described it. The walls shimmered with a soft iridescence, colors shifting fluidly across their surface like oil on water. The ceiling disappeared into a mist of faint stars. Elliot tried to speak, but his voice was caught in his throat. From the corner of the room, a figure emerged. Tall. Slender. Clad in a smooth, reflective suit that seemed to ripple with light. Its head was elongated, eyes large and almond-shaped, shining with a pale luminescence. "Do not be afraid," the being's voice echoed directly in Elliot's mind, clear, calm, and strangely soothing. It did not speak aloud, yet its words resonated inside his skull. Elliot's fear eased slightly, replaced by a deep curiosity. "Where am I?" he managed to whisper. "You are safe," the figure replied. "We brought you here to learn." To understand. Why me? Elliot asked, swallowing hard. What do you want? To share knowledge, the being said. To bridge worlds. You are a witness now, and a messenger. Elliot's head spun with questions, but his body remained still. He felt like a visitor caught between two realities. The being gestured, and a translucent screen appeared before him. Images flickered, stars and galaxies, unfamiliar symbols, and scenes of planets teeming with life. Slowly, the screen zoomed in on Earth, showing humanity's struggles and triumphs. We have watched your world for centuries, the alien said. Your species stands at a crossroads. Your choices will ripple through time. Elliot wanted to ask more, but the words escaped him. Instead, he focused on the images, the weight of their meaning sinking in. The moment stretched on, timeless. Then, without warning, the chamber dimmed, and Elliot felt himself being pulled back toward the forest, toward Stillwater. His eyes snapped open. He was lying on the damp earth, the first light of dawn creeping through the trees. His body ached, his mind buzzing. Had it been a dream? Or something more? Slowly, he stood, brushing dirt from his clothes. One thing was certain, his life would never be the same. The early morning mist clung to the trees as Elliot stumbled back toward the edge of the forest. His limbs felt heavy, his head swimming with the echoes of what he'd just experienced. He paused for a moment, leaning against a towering pine to steady himself. The forest around him seemed unchanged, quiet, natural, but Elliot knew something had shifted within him. As he emerged onto the clearing, the first rays of sunlight brushed the horizon, illuminating the dew-soaked grass. The familiar outline of his uncle's house stood silently, waiting. Elliot glanced back into the woods, half expecting the blue-white orb to appear again, but the forest was still. Back on the porch, Elliot sat, gripping a warm mug of coffee like an anchor. His hands trembled slightly, and he wiped his forehead. The weight of the night's experience felt both unreal and undeniable. Am I losing it? He muttered to himself. His phone buzzed faintly, a text from Nancy. Nancy, heard you were back late last night. Everything okay? Elliot stared at the message. He wasn't ready to share. Not yet. Instead, he typed back, just tired. Thanks for checking in. He leaned back, staring up at the clear blue sky. The forest beyond looked peaceful, but now he saw it differently, a place of mystery, of secrets. Over the next few days, Elliot found it difficult to focus. He kept replaying the encounter in his mind, trying to make sense of it. He wrote detailed notes, sketches of the alien figure, and descriptions of the shimmering chamber. Each time he read them, his disbelief wavered, but the memory was vivid. Still, no one else in town had seen anything. No strange lights, no unexplained sounds. It was as if the experience was uniquely his. One evening, as Elliot sat on the porch, a soft breeze stirred the wind chime. It tinkled faintly, a fragile sound in the silence. Then came a whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable. Don't be afraid. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. He looked into the woods. The orb was there again, hovering just beyond the tree line. Slowly, he stood. Whatever this was, his life had crossed a threshold. And there was no turning back. Elliot's breath hitched as he stared into the darkness where the orb floated, its pale blue glow flickering softly. The forest seemed to hold its breath with him, every leaf and branch still under the heavy silence. Don't be afraid, the voice whispered again, carried on the wind, but this time clearer, more insistent. He swallowed hard and stepped off the porch. The grass was cool and damp beneath his feet, the scent of pine thick in the air. The orb pulsed gently, almost beckoning him forward. His heart pounded, but an unexpected calm washed over him. This was no random light. It was an invitation. Elliot moved toward the tree line, each step measured, cautious, yet purposeful. The orb drifted just ahead, weaving between the trunks like a firefly in slow motion. As he walked deeper into the woods, the familiar sights faded into a surreal dreamscape, branches bending oddly, shadows stretching unnaturally long, and the hum, low and steady, thrumming beneath the earth. "Who are you?" Elliot whispered, voice barely audible. There was no reply, only the orb's steady pulse guiding him onward. Suddenly, the ground beneath him shifted. He stumbled, catching himself against a tree. For a brief moment, his vision blurred, and a cold rush of dizziness swept through him. He blinked and found the orb had stopped, hovering near a small clearing bathed in silver moonlight. In the center stood a metallic platform, smooth and unblemished, reflecting the starlight like liquid glass. The orb floated toward the platform, then upward, revealing a hidden set of stairs that spiraled into the darkness. Elliot hesitated, but the pull was irresistible. He stepped forward and placed a foot on the first step. "Come," the voice said gently, this time inside his mind, steady and warm. With a deep breath, Elliot began to climb. Elliot's footsteps echoed softly as he ascended the spiral stairs, the metallic surface cool beneath his shoes. The air around him seemed to hum with a quiet energy, subtle yet undeniably alive. As he reached the top, a vast chamber unfolded before him, smooth, curved walls glowing with a soft, ambient light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own heartbeat. In the center of the room stood a figure, tall and slender, its skin a muted gray with a faint luminescence. Its large, dark eyes held a calm intelligence, and though its features were unlike anything human, there was a gentle kindness in its gaze. "You are safe," the being communicated, not with words spoken aloud, but directly into Elliot's mind. The voice was soothing, echoing with warmth and clarity. Elliot felt a calm wash over his nervousness. "Why me?" he thought, unsure if he'd spoken aloud or if the question was shared telepathically. "You are curious, open to understanding," the being replied. "We observe, we learn. We seek peaceful contact." The chamber shimmered, and images appeared, vistas of distant stars, vibrant worlds teeming with life, and beings of many forms sharing knowledge across the cosmos. Elliot realized this was a glimpse into their purpose, connection, knowledge, and coexistence. Time seemed to stretch and fold, minutes passing like moments. The being reached out a slender hand, and Elliot felt a gentle touch, warm and grounding. "Remember," the being conveyed, "fear divides. Understanding unites." A soft glow enveloped Elliot, and suddenly, he was back at the edge of the forest, the first light of dawn creeping across the sky. The orb was gone, but a profound stillness filled the air. Elliot stood alone, yet not lonely. His mind buzzed with new awareness, a sense of purpose and calm he had never known. He walked back to the house, the world waking around him. The forest no longer felt mysterious or threatening, but part of a vast, interconnected whole. Elliot sat on the porch, breathing deeply. Whatever had happened was real, impossible to explain, but undeniably true. And now, with open eyes and an open heart, he was ready to face whatever came next. Ben arrived at the cabin on a rainy Thursday evening. The sky was bruised purple, and the clouds hung low like wet wool. He had driven for hours, winding through remote forest roads until the signal on his phone disappeared. That was the point, no distractions, no calls, no memories of the city. The cabin had belonged to his uncle, though Ben barely remembered him. All he knew was the man vanished years ago, and the deed ended up with Ben's mother, who passed it to him with a warning: "The place is old. It creaks. Don't let the woods get into your head." The wood smelled like damp bark and ash. The inside was sparse but tidy, a fireplace, a threadbare rug, a rusting kettle. Dust danced in a thin light seeping through yellowed curtains. Ben dropped his bag and stood still for a moment. No traffic. No sirens. Just the hush of the forest pressing against the cabin like a held breath. He thought that maybe this silence would fix something in him. But the forest does not forgive. It remembers. That first night, Ben heard a scratching in the walls. The scratching started faintly. Ben assumed it was mice. He tried to ignore it, curling under the old wool blanket on the cot, staring at the rafters. But it grew louder, as if something were dragging nails against the wood, deliberate and slow. He pounded the wall once. The sound stopped. Satisfied, he turned over. Then came a whisper. Not from outside. From inside the room. Ben. He sat up, heart pounding. His phone was on the nightstand. No service. No signal. He turned on the flashlight. Nothing. No one. Just the hush of old wood and cold air. He didn't sleep much that night. In the morning, he searched for evidence, mice, rats, something. Found nothing. He left for a hike to clear his head, but the forest paths felt unfamiliar, though he'd walked them before. When he returned to the cabin, the scratching was waiting for him. And this time, it didn't stop when he knocked. The next evening, Ben ventured deeper into the forest. He hoped a long hike would tire him enough to sleep. The canopy above swallowed the sky, casting everything in a dull, green twilight. A mile in, he stopped. He heard humming. A child's tune. High-pitched. Off-key. Echoing from deeper in the woods. "Hello." Ben called. The humming stopped. Silence. Then, a giggle. Quick, sharp, close. He spun, but saw nothing. Branches rustled above. He glimpsed something move, too fast, too thin. It vanished between the trees. He ran back. But the trail had changed. The trees weren't the same. There were no familiar landmarks. It took him hours to find the cabin again. When he did, the front door was open. Inside, the furniture had been rearranged. The old rocking chair now faced the window. And on it, a doll he didn't own. Sewn from burlap. Button eyes. Red yarn hair. In its lap, a note scrawled in ash. "We remember. Do you?" Ben burned the doll. He took it out behind the cabin, lit a match, and watched it curl into blackened threads. The smoke rose straight into the sky despite the wind. He went back inside and locked every door, every window. That night, the whispering returned, closer now. Just outside his door. It no longer sounded like mice. It sounded like voices. Too many to count. "You forgot. You forgot." They repeated it like a chant. Ben gripped the fireplace poker in his hand, sweat pouring down his neck. He opened the door in a flash, swinging the metal rod wildly. Nothing. But the hallway was cold. Freezing. And along the walls, someone had dragged a finger through the dust to write. "The Hollow Ones live here." Ben awoke with a jolt, though he hadn't realized he'd fallen asleep. A pale gray light seeped through the window, dawn, or close to it. The whispering had stopped. The house was silent. Too silent. He moved the dresser aside, cautiously opened the bedroom door, and stepped into the hallway. The main room was untouched. But he still couldn't find his keys. Or his phone. Ben opened every drawer, every cabinet. Nothing. It was like the cabin had swallowed them. Then, in the corner of the kitchen behind a loose panel, he found it, a square hole in the wall, leading into a dark crawlspace. Barely wide enough to fit through. A rancid smell drifted from within, mold and rot and something else. Older. But something in him whispered, "Look." He fetched his flashlight from his bag. The beam flickered as he aimed it inside. Dust swirled. Cobwebs hung like curtains. He swallowed hard and crawled in. The passage stretched deeper than he expected. The further he went, the colder it became. His breath fogged in the light. Then, in the beam, something glinted. Metal. His keys. He reached for them, then froze. Just beyond the keys, a face. Eyes open. Hollow. Mouth stretched unnaturally wide. A figure crouched motionless in the dark, half buried in the dirt. Its skin was gray and dry, like paper stretched too thin. It smiled. Ben scrambled backward, kicking up dirt, bumping his head against the crawlspace ceiling. He didn't stop until he was out. The keys fell from his shaking hand. From behind the panel, the singing started again, closer now. La. 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 Ben backed away, eyes wide. The panel slid shut. On its own. Ben didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the bedroom wall, staring at the closed crawlspace panel, the poker once again clenched in both hands. The whispering didn't return. The singing stopped. But the silence felt worse. It felt like breath being held. Around noon, light spilled through the cabin windows. Ben mustered the courage to step outside. He needed to clear his head, to feel something familiar. The forest greeted him like a stranger. Everything was too quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. The stream, once rushing, now trickled slowly as if suffocating. Ben wandered farther than he had before, following a narrow deer path. After half an hour, he saw something odd up ahead, a wooden sign, half-rotted, with faded black paint. Wilkins Hollow, EST 1892. He frowned. He hadn't seen any signs on the drive-in. Curious, he followed the trail beyond the sign. It led to a field overgrown with weeds and briars, where crooked wooden crosses jutted from the ground. A cemetery. Dozens of them, names long erased by time and weather. But one cross near the center was fresh. New wood. New nails. And carved into it. Benjamin Rourke, 2006. His heart stopped. He stepped back, stumbling. That was his name. And the year, it was when he was 11. The year he'd visited this cabin with his parents. He hadn't thought about it in years. They'd left early. He'd blocked most of it out. Something had happened here. Suddenly, the forest felt thicker. Wrong. A whisper echoed from the trees, soft and familiar. We never let you go. Ben turned and ran. The shadows chased him all the way back to the cabin. And inside, on the rug, footprints. Leading to the crawlspace, Ben followed the footprints. He didn't want to, but his body moved on its own, as if compelled. The crawlspace panel was ajar. He crouched before it, the stench stronger now. Behind him, the forest watched through the windows. He turned on his flashlight again, its beam flickering weakly. The crawlspace seemed darker. Wider. The walls stretched into impossible angles. He crawled in. This time, it went deeper. He passed walls covered in symbols, charcoal markings, handprints, names scratched over and over again. His name. Ben. 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 The floor was no longer dirt. It felt soft. Breathing. Something moved beside him in the dark. He swung the light. Nothing. A whisper behind him. Almost home. He turned. A door stood at the end of the passage. Wooden. Old. But pulsing with something alive. Ben reached for the handle. He didn't remember opening it. The room beyond the door was circular and vast, carved into the earth. The walls pulsed with veins. In the center stood a stone altar. And on it, a shape. It rose as Ben entered. Tall. Thin. Limbs too long. Its face was smooth, no eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched where features should be. But he felt it looking at him. Behind him, the door vanished. It stepped forward. Its movements too fluid, like liquid wrapped in bone. Ben backed away. "Why me?" he asked. It tilted its head. Then it spoke, not with a mouth, but in his mind. "You were the first to forget." Ben gripped the flashlight like a weapon. It flickered out. Darkness. Silence. Then a scream, not his own, but a child's. Dozens of them. And in the dark, hands. Hands dragging him down. Into the dirt, Ben wandered the twisted forest for what felt like hours. The sky had turned the color of rust. Time moved differently here. He came upon a clearing filled with dozens of children. But they didn't move. They stood in a circle, eyes closed, mouths open in silent screams. Ben called out. No answer. He stepped forward. Their eyes snapped open. All at once. And they spoke as one. "You promised you'd stay." He screamed, stumbling backward. The trees closed in behind him. He turned, and the cabin was there. Not behind him, in front. But older. Decrepit. Rotting. As if it had sat abandoned for 100 years. He stepped inside. The walls pulsed like veins. And on the mirror in the bathroom, written in his own handwriting. "The hollow ones are you." So did it, but slower. Delayed. Then it smiled. He turned to run, but the cabin was gone. Just trees. Trees for miles. And behind him, the sound of dozens of feet dragging through dead leaves. The hollow ones had come to collect. He ran until his legs gave out. Then, from the trees, his mother's voice. "Come home, Benny. You forgot who you were." He wept. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the cabin. In the chair. Rocking. The fire was out. Dust covered everything. He didn't remember how he got there. Or how long he'd been gone. Only that the forest was watching. And it would never let him leave again. The mirror cracked. His reflection smiled. And blinked.